This video is about all the important tests that I've done in relation to my vaccine injury, and most of them found out not through my primary care doctor, but through my own research. And in fact, some of these were available to be ordered by my primary care doctor, but she didn't, because she didn't think it was relevant. Obviously, she was wrong, and I nevertheless did it, or managed to do it myself, through research and through other doctors I found online. My vaccine injury happened on May 19th, 2021. It was the second Moderna vaccine. And in my case, it was very fast. The day after the vaccine, I already felt most of the symptoms that I came to feel for the next few years, even though there's been some improvement. These symptoms and the temporal cause and effect already made it pretty clear to me that the vaccine was the culprit and not the disease. Also because I had been extraordinarily careful with my masking and my social distancing. So this test, the first one that I did several months after my vaccine injury, it was not one ordered by my doctor, but one that I asked for, and she actually agreed to do it. And it is a test that looks for the antibodies of COVID, as opposed to those generated by the vaccine. And as you can see, it's negative. It's supposed to be the gold standard in finding the difference between both and in finding out whether or not you had COVID. And this is not a test, by the way, that my primary care doctor told me about. I had to do research, concretely reading the papers, the tweets, and watching the videos of Bruce Patterson, the renowned virologist and head of Incelldx. The next test was a cytokine test by Incelldx, and this was done in 2022, about 10 months after my vaccine injury. As you can see here, I have some very high cytokines. So the upper limit here is 9,236 and mine is 66,858. That's quite a few times the upper limit. And this cytokine is a platelet activation cytokine. According to what I've read, it is an indication of the danger of clotting and microclots. Then you have CCL5, which was also high, the upper limit being 11,800. And this cytokine is an interface cytokine, according to what I've read, that quite often is elevated after stroke in an apparent attempt of the body to decrease the excitability of neurons and thereby decrease the damage. I don't know if that's the mechanism or in any ways related to the vaccine injury, but I know that's what I've heard in relation to stroke. Then VEGF, which is an indicator of angiogenesis, which is vessel creation, and as I came to learn later, also neurogenesis, creation of new neurons. That is also very elevated. As you can see, the upper limit is 12.3, and mine is almost 10 times, 8-9 times the upper limit. So I take that to be not only inflammation of the blood vessels, the microvessels of the brain, but also an attempt of the body to create new vessels and perhaps new neurons. CCL5 is more complicated. But at this point, once I got this test, I started taking the medication prescribed in relation to the treatment of Incelldx, namely Maraviroc, which is a CCL5 or CCR5 antagonist, CCR5 being a complement cytokine to CCL5. So it will lower that number. And also these two cytokines. In addition, statins, pravastatin, and also clopidogrel at some point. So this next was done later in the year. And as you can see, after taking quite high doses of Maraviroc and statins and clopidogrel, my CD40 ligand lowered, although it was still high. CCL5 lowered as well, and VEGF completely ceased to be. I don't know what the relationship is. Perhaps, once some of these are lowered, VEGF becomes not as activated. I don't know if there's a relation or not, or if the medication directly lowered it. I don't know. There was not much correlation with improvement in symptoms. But nevertheless, I do understand that you don't want some of these cytokines to be high. And that was the purpose of the medication, to lower these cytokines, as well as in the theory, which has not been confirmed, but the theory of Bruce Patterson's Incelldx company, that the viral debris in the body, which is to some extent in monocytes, irritating the endothelium of microvasculature, that somehow this medication would contribute to eliminating that viral debris. Next was another cytokine test. So this is almost a year later, still no COVID. I remain very careful with my masking, social distancing, and so forth, and plus being so fatigued from symptoms that were very similar to long COVID, although more appropriately called long vax. I was laying in bed, so didn't really socialize very much, but negative again. Next was another cytokine test, and I basically tapered off the medication to a substantial extent, maintaining a vegan diet that I have with a lot of anti-inflammatory components and spices, turmeric with pepper and amla and berries and things like that. But nevertheless, stopping medication and only sporadically taking Maraviroc when my headaches, especially on the back of my head, got worse, which Maraviroc helps for that. Not taking it the way I was before the second panel, I think increased VEGF, so it went up almost to 100. And that is almost as high as the first panel. A CD40 ligand, also quite high. And the one that was normal this time, although very close to the upper limit, was CCL5. Unfortunately, IF and gamma for the first time was high. Thus, an indication quite often, as I learned, of autoimmune disease. So there's this theory by Dr. Bean Actually, it's not his theory, but he was talking about a study that showed some evidence for the theory that, in fact, some long COVID symptoms may be due to the creation of autoantibodies. So the spike protein creates antibodies, but then your own body has a hard time distinguishing the spike protein from those autoantibodies that are created to counter the antibodies. It's complicated, but basically, it's the body in some ways attacking itself, and that is an indication of it. And some of these being low as well, which before it was either not recognized as such or I don't remember exactly what the values were, but that's also an indication of immune abnormalities. The next, there was a study that was highlighted by Dr. Bean of long haulers having high neurofilament light chain, which is an indicator of neuronal damage. So I don't know why this neuronal damage is happening. It could be because there's not enough perfusion of the brain, because the microvasculature is damaged through inflammation and microclots. It could be some type of immune thing. It could be the autoimmune issue that I just described, the body attacking itself. I don't know. But the point here is that the test came back high. And this depends on your age as well. So if you are older, you are expected to have a higher neurofilament light chain, but mine, for my age, it was a high. This, by the way, is available. Your doctor can order it. Mine refused because she claimed that it wouldn't change treatment. Of course, treatment has been nothing. I've been offered no medication, nothing. Everything that I'm taking is through an online doctor, because the so-called protocol doctors that make up most of the primary care doctors in our system, well, they will only prescribe you something if it is somehow already been proven beyond any doubt and incorporated into the system, and that may take years and years and years. But when I show them the study and show them that long haulers had been shown to have high neurofilament light chain, they said that they wouldn't do it, even though they hadn't found anything abnormal in their tests. They had no biomarkers at all of their own. Everything that I showed them, which includes all these tests, were things that I had to find outside. And by the way, even the second nucleocapsid test, which I was with a different doctor from when I had the first, she fought me like hell. She didn't want to give it to me. And finally she did, after I told her that I needed that to, realize or find out whether or not I wanted a booster. Of course, I really didn't want a booster, but I told her that because they were pushing that booster. And I said, well, I need to know, to have a preponderance of evidence here that my disease is not due to some asymptomatic COVID, but due to the vaccine. Anyway, the next test was, let me see here, this S1 protein immune subset panel. What it does is it actually looks at your T cells, breaks them down, and also at whether or not you have viral debris, the S1 protein. And here you can see if we can focus here, and see if I can get so right here, see it says S1 in the subset of monocytes. S1 is the COVID spike protein, and so I don't have any. And this is, by the way, already 25 months after the vaccine. Um, and then, so it looks at the S1, where it says S1, and intermediate monocytes and non-classical monocytes, and in classic monocytes, and in all of them 0. And my experience is that a lot of people who follow the protocol on the Incelldx page, they are able to get rid of the viral debris, which initially it shows, but this test is close to $500, so I only have done it once. But it shows up to about 2 years, and then your body stops showing that you have viral debris. Although I'm not convinced that it's not still in the body, because even though it's not showing in monocytes, monocytes are like the garbage trucks of the body. So a lot of the infections and things that you have, and perhaps viral debris, even in bone marrow, which they have found in the meninges and so forth, you would think that as it gets released into the blood, that these monocytes would pick them up and so be a kind of a marker. But I would also think that perhaps sometimes they're not 100% accurate as an indicator of you having viral debris. I know for a fact some of the people on the page who have done this test quite a few times, sometimes it was 0, but then the next time it wasn't. So, but in my case, thankfully it was 0, but I had immune abnormality. So for instance, look at, so I have a low number of CD3 T mature cells, right? Not by too much. That's at the top right here. And that indicates some type of deficiency in these cells. It's not huge, but perhaps they've been through a bit of a battle. The CD4 and CD T cells, look at the number 056, 049. They're normal, but they're on the lower end. And also normal, but kind of on the lower end. The ratio is normal, which is good. However, now non-classical monocytes, the minimum is 2550 minor 2, so it's quite a low, 10 times the lower limit. Then the intermediate monocytes are quite high. See here being the upper limit 13.4, minor 3776. And once again, classical monocytes quite low, with the minimum having to be 34.4. So all this indicates there's some type of immune issue, immune irregularity. And it's hard to interpret. And unfortunately, I haven't had a meeting with the Incelldx doctors, an appointment with them yet. But as you can see, the regular panels and tests that your primary care doctor orders are not going to show any of this. And they may, like they did to me at the beginning, kind of lean toward declaring you a psychological case, basically gaslighting you. But I'm showing you these tests to show you that there are markers, biomarkers of your disease, even if it's hard to detect and obscure.